All right. Hey, everybody. We're now recording the meeting. All right. I was going to say, I put together a file of all the links I'm going to talk about today, and I'm putting it in the chat here. And if you're viewing this after the session, I can send that to you, or I can somehow attach it to the video. I'll figure out how to do that. But the main thing to know about grants for writing is that there are several different kinds. And the first kind I'm going to talk to you about is what we call a project grant. And so for those grants, each Minnesota Regional Arts Council has some funds to give to writers in their region, writers and all other kinds of artists too. So if you have friends who do other kinds of art, you can tell them about this too. Those are project-oriented grants. And what that means is that you come up with a method of moving yourself along in your process. So an example is if you have a novel that you've outlined, but you just can't find time to sit down and just crank out that draft, you would call that your novel writing project. And you would make a schedule of how you're going to do that. And I'm going to actually mute all of you too, because it will keep flipping to you if you make noise, okay? And so if you want to talk, unmute yourself. Oh, somebody else is joining us too. It's Norhan. Some of you might remember Norhan. Is she coming? There she is. Hey, Norhan, you're muted.
Hi.
Hi. So I just want you to know that I'm recording the meeting. So that people who aren't here can benefit from it later. And everybody else is cool with that. Are you all right with that?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, I'm going to mute you again, and I'm going to keep talking. Remember that if you have a question, you can put it in the chat too, if you want to ask me a question and have me answer it while I'm talking. So I was just explaining that the grants I'm going to talk about first are project-oriented grants. And I'm going to grab that document and take us to the Regional Arts site. So, share screen. So this is the Minnesota State Arts Board Regional Art Council's map. What's really exciting to me is that some of you moved out to the boondocks since you were in my classes. And so you can see the Metropolitan Regional Arts Council is here, and that's all the metro counties. And that would be me. I think Jen still lives in Burnsville. You know, I'm not sure where you live, Grace, but I think you're in that county area. And so that's one Regional Arts Council. I believe, Jane, you're in this one. But you can see like geographically, and I know, Anastasia, you're in this one. So I'm going to click on Anastasia's here. And this is the Prairie Lakes Regional Arts Council. And so each of them has unique requirements for their grants and different deadlines. And so you can see when their grant deadlines are here. Trying to see here. I haven't looked at this one in particular. Arts and Cultural Heritage Grant. So those are more community-oriented things. Artist Development Grants. Okay. So you can get up to $1,500. It looks like it's suspending it and replacing with this new artist grant because of COVID. So you're going to see some of that stuff going on here too. But this is last year's deadline. I'll expect them to be putting stuff up about this year's deadline soon. And Anastasia, if you know Dee Larson Quinn, did you ever know Dee? I don't even know if she was teaching at Normandale when you were there. She lives down in St. Peter, and she got one of these last year. And also Rhonda Redman, who works at the art center down there. I believe she has gotten one of these as well. So those are some people you can talk to. But the main thing is that you know where these pages are and that you can find them. Let me see here. I always do this where, all right. So then, Jane, I think this would be you. Do you think so too? Let's see. So Jane, I can't hear you. I'm going to unmute you, I think. I can't unmute you.
Okay, I unmuted me.
Okay.
That says Southwest Minnesota, and I see Hutchinson, but
is that west?
Do they have like a description of, is it Wright County? Does it say, or? Because I don't know that we're more west central, I would say, but we could be part of that. Because Hutchinson, we just came through Hutchinson like 35 minutes ago.
Right.
Do they have a description of like their area, their service area here?
Their counties.
Nope.
No.
There's no right there. No. So we must be the one north of there.
Okay.
But I've been through all those counties today.
So
I'm proud.
Oops.
Yeah, I'm probably 7W. Yeah, that would be it. Yeah, central.
Right. So some of them,
right.
like here's the arts, the different arts grants. And the ones that I look at the individual artist award, because they tend to be more what, so that's up to 2,000. Yeah, see, you're in there.
Okay.
And so it tells you how you qualify. Most of you would qualify. And then the guideline. So this deadline is, okay, I'm going to mute you again because I'm echoing. So this deadline is January 7th. So you have time to write one here. And if I'm just going to show you the guidelines because they'll be really similar between different areas. Let's see, that's not it. That's my other grant. All right. Yeah, I just brought some Steam games. All right. So what you really want to look at when you're doing a grant is it is the ultimate know your audience and give them what they want type of writing. Okay. And I know some of you like really enjoyed freshman comp and some of you maybe not as much, but this is where those skills come into play. So you look at who can apply. That tells you a little bit about what they're looking to fund. And so usually what you have to do is you have to send work samples with descriptions, and you also have to send in like all these things. So an artist statement, it's a brief statement about you and your art. The nice thing is once you write one of these, you can reuse them in other grant opportunities, you know, so that's why we're going to have a workshop in mid-December for any of you who are interested in having me look at what you've done and give you some pointers. These are great guidelines. They're very specific. Sometimes they're just like, yeah, write a statement. You're like, what is that? You know, but this is really great. They're telling you exactly what they want. Not overstated. That's so funny. Writers must just go ahead and go blah, 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 blah. Process and technique. So they want to understand what kind of writer you are, what may be important for a reviewer to know about how your work is made. This is probably more geared for the visual artists who are doing kind of weird stuff that nobody's heard about, but you can talk a little bit about your own writing process and how your writing is maybe different. In your case, Jane, I would totally capitalize on the local quality of your work because they love funding things that are about their regions, you know, that have a local basis. Your work samples, okay? They tell you how to upload things and how much they want. Obviously, they have to be within the last 5 years, and I don't know how you'd violate copyright with your own work, but I suppose it's possible. And then here's the literary ones: original poetry, prose. You may not exceed 10 pages, and they tell you about the formatting here. So this is the important part. So you definitely want to tell them all this other stuff about equity because they really do track all that stuff. but it's the $1 million question most people have at this point is, okay, I did all that, but how can I make my my application really shine and get picked? And you can't know exactly what the criteria is or how it's weighed unless they give you that information. Some grant makers do that. They're like, it's like the professor handing you the rubric, and so it's really easy. Some don't. When I was reviewing grant applications for the State Arts Board, the work sample was worth 50% of the points. And so, people who handed in, unproofread work or, stuff that didn't make sense, they were just pretty much automatically not going to get it. So you want to send in your strongest work. Now, that's to say, too, that you could send in your strongest work and the people reviewing the grants, it's not their cup of tea. It doesn't mean your work sucked. It just means that it wasn't what they were looking for. You just never really know who's going to be reading these. The other thing to keep in mind is that they're going to want, usually, I don't see this here, but because usually the money you have to tell them what you want to spend it on, and like you have a plan for spending the money. They don't just usually hand you money and say, use it for whatever you want. So it looks like they have some kind of, there's probably a form you fill out online that asks you about all that. But maybe it says the purpose of the award is to recognize and support artists. So maybe there isn't a plan necessary for this one. It's kind of odd, but that they can do whatever they want in whatever region they are in. So that's why it's really important to read the guidelines. The Minnesota State Arts Board itself has statewide grants, but all of those programs have been suspended for COVID. They're moving that money into projects that support writers of color and other groups. If you fall into one of those groups, I would definitely tell you to apply. Usually the way it used to work is everybody from all over Minnesota can apply in every discipline, and you had that work plan, you had a budget that made sense. And so that was worth 50% of the points. Where is your project really going to move you forward in your career? How are you making that argument that it will? Is the thing that the things that you're spending money on, did you really look for good quotes on how much that stuff cost? And are your prices realistic? Is your timeline realistic? Or are you trying to do like a year's worth of work in a month? Those are all the things that people look at in those applications. The Metro Regional Arts Council grants are almost identical to what these used to be. And so those would involve that work plan where you're making that argument. This is the next step in my career. I'm organized. I'm trustworthy. You should trust me. You can even write in, because this is taxable income that you're getting, you can even write in a percentage to go towards paying the taxes on the money you would get. I know that's pretty, crazy, but I always ended up paying taxes on it because I forgot to do that. So I thought I would mention it. But these are I think this will probably come back in some form or another eventually, maybe next year. But these are very competitive, but they do like to give them to people from all different areas in their career. The Metro Region Arts Council grants, let's see, I have to drag this over. Back here. They're called Next Step grants, and they actually try to find people who are just starting out, who aren't necessarily really, it's right here, established in their careers. I've never been able to get one because they always told me I was too far along in my career to get one. So here's the next stuff. So you can get up to $5,000 here in the city. please read the guidelines before you apply. It's kind of like read the assignment before you do it. It's a lot. It's so much like school. So they're really articulating what they want to fund. They want to fund people who want to transition their creative process to address current social realities, to help people overcome barriers to success, professionalize, or increase their output or quality, which essentially would be writing that thing you've been trying to write forever, but all these other things got in your way. Complete a project, like that marks a significant milestone. Your first book would be a huge milestone, you know, and I got one to do that. That was my first Arts Board grant that I got, that was a statewide Arts Board grant to finish my first book. And it also funded me to go to Bread Loaf Writers Conference, which helped me publish that first book because I made a lot of really great contacts there at that time. My second Arts Board grant funded the marketing for that book once it got published. I got that one 3 years afterwards. And so that one helped me reach new markets, community markets, and also overcome that barrier of my publisher didn't have any marketing money. So it helped get the word out about my book. So that's kind of an overview of these Minnesota only grants. Like I said, in normal years, you could apply for both the statewide and your regional ones. The statewide ones have been suspended and different grants have taken their place. And honestly, I haven't really looked at those because the ground seemed to be shifting so much that I wasn't sure where things were going to land. So if you are interested in doing that, you can check that out at the MRAC or the Minnesota State Arts Board site. So I'm going to stop at this point, and if you guys have any questions, you can ask them. Anybody have any questions about these types of grants? Yes, Jane? Let's see, I can't.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. So one of the things in this grant that I want to apply for, they want to know what we're going to use the money for. What should I tell them?
You should have a really good thing you're going to use that money for, not a goat. Just kidding.
Goats are great. So I mean, one of the things I thought we talked about the other night was getting money to like basically take on a mentor or I don't know what word you use for a person to help us sort of along with the process.
So here's some suggestions for you that people I know have done or I have done. So if you know somebody who is a good editor, you know of them, you know, you can query them. You can say, hey, I'm applying for this Minnesota State Arts Board grant. I want to include in it consultations with you if I get it. I can't afford to pay you if I don't. You know, you kind of want to preface that and just say if I get this grant, how much would you charge me? So you get an actual quote from the person. The other thing you can do is you can contact places like the Loft that offer like services like that and just ask them, you know, how much do you charge for manuscript consultations, that kind of. I would recommend that you don't choose somebody that's looked at a lot of your work before, because, you know, like if you picked me, I'd kind of be like, you know, that's great, but maybe you should pick somebody who doesn't know you as well, because they'll give you fresh perspectives on that. And I think granting boards tend to look at that too. They're like, well, why do they want to go back to the same people they've always worked with? That doesn't make sense to me. You know, that's not a new step, right? The other thing that they like to fund is workshops, you know, like the Bemidji Writers Conference, you know, stuff like that. It's easy to look up how much it would be to go to one of those conferences, and we can be optimistic, I think. And especially if it took place in the fall, I think we'll be opened up enough that people will be okay traveling places by fall. The statewide grants don't allow you to use the money outside of Minnesota, but I think the regional ones do. It would be something to look at. And so conferences, get-togethers, there's even like online stuff that maybe they would be okay with like taking, I see Margaret Atwood is doing, an online seminar. Wouldn't that be amazing to work with Margaret Atwood? But
is she the lady with the curly gray hair?
she wrote The Handmaid's Tale, and
yeah, and I just got, because they're doing those what do they call them? They're offering a lot of them online now. It's they're called that looked really intriguing.
Well, right. So maybe something like that, if you can make the argument that it, works for you. You guys probably know Alicia Conroy. She teaches at Normandale. She's writing this really great novel about how the French moved in, the French Canadians, their Acadians arrived over into the US, and how they intermingled with the Micmac Native American tribes and stuff. And so part of her grant was going to Maine and interviewing Micmac elders and going to the libraries where all of the where all of the documents were kept. So research can also be part of your proposal. Anastasia and Grace, you can apply for childcare funds. Most of my grant paid for childcare when I was writing. When I wrote my first grant to finish my book, I wrote it to have somebody care for my children during the day when my husband was at work, and also to pay for this cabin I rented in the middle of nowhere, to write. And I remember calling my husband after one day of that and being like, I haven't spoken all day. This is so amazing. And now I'm in quarantine or whatever, and I still love it. So, Conan's crying. He's like, don't go away, Mom. So there's actually anything that you can think of that you would need money for, you can ask for. I've had friends who had their rent paid and their utilities paid so they could stay home and write and not work, Did you have a question, Grace? Okay, go ahead.
Yes. So since it says up to $5,000, when you're preparing, like, say they're like, okay, well, what are you going to use the money for? Mm-hmm. And you're prepping that, you want to pretty much say like, well, this is what I would do with $5,000, and this is how I would need it to be able to write.
You can make it. You don't want to assume that the people reading your grant are readers.
Okay. Yeah. No, I'm good at finance, so.
you want to call it a budget, and you want to have line items, and you want to indicate how that's how much that costs. So what did you do to estimate that cost? Okay. The thing that a lot of them don't like funding is your new Mac, or like they're kind of like, yeah, I don't know. I think you're using this grant just to get a new computer, and I'm not so sure that, that said that, peripheral equipment. So say you want to do like online spoken word and you need a really great microphone, they'd probably be okay with that. So you see how it really does depend on the arguments you're making, and then also, why you need that, why you need to make the need apparent to them, and then also be realistic in costs. So there used to be even people who would pay themselves to write. I don't think that that's still in favor. I don't think you can pay yourself to write. Yeah. But you can cover your expenses, and that's kind of the same thing called something different, right? If you paid the rent with the money you would have made working, and your rent is being paid by the grant, then essentially you are kind of paying yourself in a way, The thing to remember too, though, is that whatever you spend your money on, you need to keep records and receipts, because at the end of the grant, you have to write a grant report, and you have to submit that by a certain date along with any documentation that they require. Some grants require a lot, some don't. But it's really important to save everything, just in case you're audited. That has happened, or they don't really believe that you've done what you did. So those things, I guess grants are not for the disorganized. In general, most disorganized people don't write good proposals, and they also don't submit good reports, and so it can get you in trouble. So you have to really be on your organizational game. I'm not really worried about any of you guys. I have had people I know, if you don't turn in your report, you kind of get blackballed from ever applying for a grant again. And so that's pretty bad. So you wouldn't want that to happen. They also are very helpful. So like if you have a question, you can get in touch with these arts board entities, and there are people there who are very, very helpful. So they even have like webinars telling you how to apply and answering different questions and stuff like that. So the Minnesota Arts Board stuff is really, really well done, in my opinion. So, yeah.
I have one more follow-up question,
Yeah.
kind of. So, if you were to apply for this grant and they gave it to me or whatever, obviously I wouldn't want to be working totally full-time, so I actually put time towards my writing to be utilizing the grant appropriately to actually finish my writing.
Right.
But is it looked down upon to be holding a job and being able to get a grant, or do you need to be like, well, I'm going to quit my job? And
it depends on the scope of your grant. I mean, like say you say in your grant, I want to write 10 more hours a week, and I want to take 10 hours off from my job, and I need 10 hours of childcare to do that. Okay. And that the amount of writing that you have written in your proposal matches 10 hours a week in their minds, that should be totally fine.
Okay.
And then you can also, say the 10 hours a week that you're not working amounts to X number of dollars that you would put towards your house payment or your utilities or something like that, and fractions are fine. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, so let's see, I gotta find I don't even know where I am now. I'm gonna go back in to see you guys and go back to the chat and open up my document again. Okay, there we go. So, share my screen. So the next thing I want to talk about that I have on this sheet that I've put in chat. And Norhan, if you can't see it, let me know, because sometimes it seems like when you come in after somebody's posted something in chat, you can't see the document. So I can repost it. But up at the top here is just kind of what I would call general lists of grants that you can sift through on your own time. This one in particular is mega huge, this Funds for Writers. And I actually subscribe to her mailing list because once a week I get another list of cool stuff that I could apply for. So Norhan can see it, yay. And so I just subscribe to her list, but you can see the whole list here. And the thing about grants is a lot of organizations serve specific types of individuals. So there's LGBTQ grants, there's grants for writers of color, there's grants for women, there's grants for Native Americans, there's grants for people with disabilities. So there's all these different types of grants, a lot of local state grants too. So I would say on your own time, definitely check those out and go through those. The other thing that's unique to Minnesota, other than the Arts Board grants, are Minnesota residencies. There are 3 different ones in Minnesota that I know of. There may be more. And these residencies, this one's the Anderson Center, which is in Red Wing, Minnesota. I'm sure most of you know where that is. It's kind of southeast of the Twin Cities. And for these can actually be part of other grant applications. So you can kind of stack things up where you can say, I'm going to, do this residency at Anderson Center, but I need money for childcare when I'm there. Frankly, I never did one of these because I couldn't be away that long. I just couldn't swing it. because of twins. um, but these are really cool. So you can apply by February 15th for residencies during any of these months, May, June, July, September, October. And it's 2 or 4 weeks that you can apply for. And let's see, what does it say here? I think, oh, here we go. So a month long, let's see, applications are being accepted for the Jerome Emerging Artist Residency. This is only in August. And you get $625 a week honoraria, which would help pay for childcare if you so needed it. It's so only people in Minnesota and New York City can apply. It's because of the Jerome Foundation being based in those 2 areas. And so it's 5 different artists. They each receive $625 a week honoraria, a travel stipend, which for you guys would be like $50 for gas. And then you can spend a month there. And I've had friends do this and they absolutely loved it because you end up there with different artists from different areas that you haven't met before, and you end up making friends with really cool people. For some of you, this would make more sense than others. But that's one of the residencies. The New York Mills one, this is the Culture Center. I love how they spell culture, Kulcher. So I've known people who've done this one too. Ed Bach Lee, who teaches at Metro, has done this one. And you get to spend time in New York Mills, Minnesota. This one will have a deadline sometime next year. It's not open at the moment, but it's this tiny little town where there's nothing to do. So it's a great place to write. And speaking of tiny little towns with not much to do, Lanesboro, which is near where I grew up, also has a residency program you can apply for. It's suspended this year because of COVID. They had to push everything back another year. But again, just something to have on your radar. And again, it's the Jerome Foundation. So they love to fund these residencies around the area. And so you get a place to live. And the one requirement of this one that's pretty cool is you have to engage with the locals. You have to give a reading. Or my friend Morgan, Grace Willow, who's a poet, she was writing a collection about, she grew up on a farm like I did, and she was writing a collection about barns. I don't know how you write a poetry collection about barns, but she did it. And so she met with a bunch of farmers and talked about barns, and it was pretty cool. So she said she learned a lot from that. So these are just other types of, and depending on your life stage, it might not make sense for you right now, but it's something to know that it's out there. And so for you guys, Anastasia and Grace, there are 2 parent grants that you might want to look at. This one, the Sustainable Arts Foundation, $5,000 each to 20 artists and writers with children. Unrestricted cash, you can pay, you can use it for whatever you want. Free money. Those aren't normal, okay? You have to, essentially you're only judged on your work. So you want it to be your strongest work. Racial equity, they make half of their awards to applicants of color, so they have different categories that you can enter in. And the criteria, the portfolio is the primary factor. So it's just send in your art, cross your fingers, and hope to God. That's pretty much what it is. Personally, I've not had a lot of success with those types of grants, but I would encourage you to try. It also is really good because it gets your strongest portfolio together. And then again, you have all these little, if I would just keep a folder on my computer called grants and have your artist statement in there, have your project proposal in there, have your portfolio in there, and whatever you need for whatever grant, you tweak it to fit the grant you're applying for. But you have that basic one done, and then you don't have to keep reinventing the wheel every time. This Pen Parentis one, they are such a cool organization. they require that you have a kid under 10. Like it has to be at the really hard part. And they give $1,000 and a year of mentorship with established writers. And then they also have a publication opportunity. John Jodzio from the Twin Cities got this a few years ago. He used to come and talk to my students about grants because he was such a good grant writer. He was getting these all over the place. And so this is another great opportunity. Jane and I can't do it anymore. Our kids are too old. The national, I don't think is it NEA? Yeah, National Endowment for the Arts. This is another one where it's just like a Hail Mary. You send in your stuff and you're just like, hope to God I get it. I probably won't, but I got to try. And it alternates years from poetry to fiction. I believe next year's fiction. This year was poetry. It's $25,000 to spend however you want. Anna George Meek got one of these and I was insanely jealous. And then she went to Costa Rica and I was like doubly jealous. So yes. I'm sure she got some really great poems out of that though. So these are very competitive. And like I said, you have no idea who's reading it. You just send in your best work and you just hope that they like it and pick you. Most people apply many times before they get it. I will just say that too. So this may interest some of you because it's related to COVID relief. And I know Jen has experienced some setbacks because of COVID. This is $500, which isn't a ton, but it is something. And I haven't read the guidelines specifically, but it says eligibility. Artists living in Minnesota, income loss from cancellation, closures, and postponements, medical emergency, theft, or natural disaster. And I think these cancellations, closures, and postponements, I'm not sure they have to do with the art, but it may. And then, so I would probably call them and ask questions if you have questions about whether or not you're eligible. The deadline for this is way soon. It's like in a few weeks. And they keep running it. So they'll do it and then they'll run another one. So if you end up in a situation where you need it, there are a lot of these out there, but I started reading the guidelines and most of them, I think kind of unfairly, require you to have a book published before you're even eligible for the funding, or they want you to be like somebody who relied on the arts for your living and you can't work because of the arts. And so most of us aren't in that situation. And then this one's for you, Anastasia. Speculative literature grants. Oh, you too. Grace, do you write fantasy? One of you guys does. I can't remember.
Amber.
Okay. So some of these deadlines have passed, but as you can see, some of them are still to come. So the Working Class Writers Grant, I think we would all fit into that category. The deadline is December 31st. It's $1,000, and it's working class, blue collar, poor and homeless writers who have been historically underrepresented in speculative fiction due to financial barriers. There's an older writers grant that doesn't close until next year, 50 or older writing speculative fiction. And there's another one here, the South Asian diaspora. But there are other ones that these will all come up later on in the year, because they just cycle. They always, go around and do the next one. The place I forgot to put on my list, because it's sad because I should have thought of it, is the Loft Literary Center, because they run several grant programs out of the Loft. And the most well-known being the McKnight Artist Fellowship. Again, I've known several people who have won these. Oh, it's open. Okay, $25,000 again. So they tell you, so here's the 2020 winners. So 4 awards alternate annually between prose and poetry spoken word. So it looks like 2020 was poetry. So fiction will be in 2021. Oh, the guidelines downloaded. Okay, creative prose and children's literature / older children. So they tell you all about it here. So here's the thing is that they want you to be a little bit more established, again, the publishing a book, or here's how I qualified before I published a book: 5 pieces of original work in no fewer than 3 literary journals. The Paper Lantern does not count, so because it was a local only publication. So if that's not you, here's some incentive. Start sending your stuff out and get it published in some literary magazines, and you'll start qualifying for some of these grants and awards. So yeah, here's the ineligible student-only publications. You know, they're pretty, they lay it out pretty well. But the McKnight is a very coveted award. And every once in a while, there's like a surprise where it's like, wow, I've never heard of this person, but they just won, and it really launches them into their writing careers. The Mentor series, I can't recommend enough. I think it was suspended this year, but again, keep an eye out for it. The way that I'm just going to talk about it because it looks like, yeah, they closed it for COVID because it was so interpersonal in nature. But the way it works is they bring in pretty famous people, and you can apply to be a mentor of one of the mentors of this famous person. So I believe Dinez Smith was the poetry mentor last time, and like 4 or 5 poets win the right to work with him over the course of a year. So they have workshops with him, they work with each other, and it's kind of like your BFA on steroids. You know, it's really motivated, really good people that you haven't met before that you're working with, and it's really been a launching experience. I think some of you might know Anthony, Lynette's adopted son, Anthony Ceballos. He went to Hamlin. He did this, and I think he really would say that it was transformative for him. And what was the third one here? I've never heard of this one, so I'm gonna look at this. Oh, it's Indigenous Writers. So again, they'll probably be launching that again once COVID ends. So do anybody have any questions at all?
So I mentioned in the chat that I couldn't see the doc. So if you could just post it, yeah.
Oh, I thought you said you could. So sorry. I'm going to upload it again. So yeah, you guys can grab that if you want and keep it, or, you know, I can send it to you some other time too. The thing to remember about grants is that the more narrow the population that it's aimed at, the better shot you have, because there's fewer people. So out there in Wright County, Jane, I don't know if there's a lot of people out there who are gonna be applying for that grant. And so she's got, you know, it's like if you have 5 people in a room and they all have an equal chance at something, it's a lot higher chance than if there's 20 people in the room, you know. So so that's something to keep in mind. If you're in a like say Amber, there are grants for African American women writers. Apply for those, okay? Because that's a smaller pool of people. And parents also, a lot of parents don't even apply because they're like, I'm too busy, I don't really want to start writing right now. And Norhan, I know there are grants too for Arab American students and Muslim students. You know, I would look into that. Jen, you have so many different things going on. I think that would qualify you for different grants too right now. And also I would offer any of you who are here or anybody who is watching this later, just I'd be happy to meet with you individually and talk with you about that too. You probably heard me say this when you were my student because I say it a lot, but you can't win if you don't enter. You know, you can't get published if you don't send in your work. And you don't have to take rejection personally. In fact, you shouldn't. Because you just never know who's reading this, what their criteria are, what their prejudices are, as far as like, you know, maybe they just hate fantasy and you wrote a fantasy story and there was no way they would ever give it to one, no matter how good it was. You just have no idea. And on that line too, especially those of you who live in the non-metro area, and even those of you who do, a great way to learn a lot about grants is to volunteer to read them and to serve on those boards that award them. I learned a ton about how somebody evaluating grants thinks after I'd evaluated 200 grant applications. You know, and also how the other evaluators think. You know, I was on a grant panel once, and we had this rubric that we were supposed to follow to, you know, evaluate the grants. And that's like second nature to me. I'm a teacher. We do that all the time. But there were people on the panel who were like, yeah, do we really have to follow that? Because, you know, I just kind of like this one and I'd like to give them the money. And I'm like, no, no, you can't do that. You know, but what if all of them were like that? You just have no idea, you know, in a lot of cases. So, I would say the other thing, since you're all women, I can say this, is that we tend to give up too soon, we women. We tend to be like, oh, it must suck because 3 people said it sucked. It's like, no. Men don't think that way. So don't you think that way. Men are just like, yeah, I'm going to keep trying until it works. So that's what you got to do. There is a group called VITA. They're an advocacy group for women writers. And they used to run seminars called Submit Like a Man. Just keep sending it out, you know. So I definitely want to encourage all of you to do this. And the hardest one you write is going to be that first one, because you're starting from zero and you're just like, okay, I have to write this artist statement and blah, blah, blah. And also you will have a sucky first draft of every part of your grant application, just like you have a sucky first draft of everything you write. And that's fine. At least you have a first draft, and, you know, then we can work on it. The other thing I'll point out is that every one, I believe, of your former faculty members at Normandale has won one of these grants. And so if you're still close to them or you're comfortable contacting them and just saying, hey, what was your experience? Or do you have any tips for me? You know, they may have ideas for you too. So we love it when our alums win awards and grants, because then we get to brag about you on the AFA page. So I don't know, you guys want to unmute yourselves? Should we chat? Bored by our chit chat.
I have a question though, Kris.
Yeah.
So you can get grant funding for research, correct?
Yeah.
So that research also can include experience-based things, right? Like say you're going and you're writing about a process in a novel and you have to get hands-on to understand the process. That constitutes research, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, what it boils down to in most instances is how well you argue your need for the thing you're asking for. And I think the biggest mistake people make is they don't connect the dots for the uninformed, you know. And I also think that, especially with writers, like the MRAC, the Metro Regional Arts Council, most of their readers for their grants are not writers. And so they're visual artists and other kinds of artists. And so if you start writing in shorthand that only writers understand, if you use the word workshop and you don't explain what that is, it can hurt you because they're, you know, potters. They make pots. They don't write. So the other thing is like getting too chatty and too wordy. You just, you know, if you ever took business writing from me, some of you I think did, it's condensing everything down to as few words as possible to get your point across, be very clear, very concise, use headings and bullet points and things to guide the eye to the things that you need people to see. It's not like writing a rambling essay about all the cool things you want to do. It's not.
So it's more like a resume based format.
Kind of, yeah, or a cover letter even, where or a, you know, process, because a lot of times if you're writing, you know, a set of directions for yourself is essentially what you're writing. This is what I'm going to do in this order. And or for my sabbatical project, it's a lot like a grant project. So I had to tell the administration what I was going to do in September and what I was going to do in October, and, you know, and so on and so forth, to get to the end product of what I had in mind for my sabbatical project. It's all out the window because of COVID, but you know, I am doing it. I'm just not doing things in the order I said I was, because a lot of my stuff depended on other people who, if you can believe it, Southwest State is still teaching in-person classes, and the teachers have to disinfect their classrooms and stuff. I mean, it's all these like additional things that they're having to do, plus the stress and stuff has made it hard for them to do things on my schedule. And so sometimes you have to revise that schedule. Most grantors don't care as long as you end up getting stuff done. You know, if it's done out of the order, what they want to see is that you have a plan, that, you know, A has to come before B, and, you know, that you have that written out. All of you guys are totally capable of that, you know, planning out, essentially breaking a big thing into small pieces. That's all it is.
When you say that, to have like an outline, like to show them what you are planning to do, does it mean like like I'm going to do like a collection of memoirs? Like, does every story need to be done? Or like, can I be like, well, this is going to be my story. Like maybe half of or a quarter of them are done, but I need to do the, you know, rest of the 60 to 75% of the.
Yeah, that's
right.
what I would say is, you know, that you have an outline of the entire, and they don't usually want to see that, by the way, but that you have an outline of the entire work, but that you have a certain percentage of it that still needs to be completed. They actually like pages more than percents. Like I have to write 80 more pages. Yeah. I estimate that it will take me X number of hours to write these pages. Okay. And then I estimate it will take this amount of time to get those pages to the editor I've chosen, and then give them 3 weeks to respond and back. And like, well, I did one like that too, where I had actually estimated revision time after that too. So like I gave myself a month to revise after getting comments from the editor. So, you know, those kinds of things that show them that you know yourself as a writer, and you also know what you need to do, and you have an estimate of how long that will take you. Yeah.
If you want to.
Mm-hmm. Good questions.
So,
you guys thinking you want to write one?
Yes.
All right.
The other question I have, Kris, and this is kind of maybe you and Alicia Conroy did something a few years ago about just submitting, you know, short work and poetry and all that, and all the ways to do it. And of course, I wrote it all down and put it in a folder, and I never opened it again. So would you ever consider doing something like that again, or even sending out just a page of suggestions?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding. Yes, I would.
I was slack. And I know when you went through my portfolio, like, Jane, you should really try to publish this. And of course, I've just never gotten around to it. And now that I'm kind of getting revived into writing, I'm like, you know, I really think I'd like to start submitting some of this stuff and seeing if I can't get some things published, some short things.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I could just run one of those, like one of these, you know, just have people drop in if they want. It would probably be a lot like what we did before. I can tell you about a couple of websites you can check out in the meantime.
Okay.
Newpages.com is a great list of literary magazines and places where people can publish their work. It's free, so people like it because it's free. The one that I pay for is called duotrope.com, duotrope.com. And I think it's $5 a month. I just pay for it a year at a time. And, and that's searchable data.
Poor Misty.
So it's a searchable database, and you can search it by all different kinds of criteria. Poetry, so by genre, by how much it pays, which is funny, but they don't pay. But or even like topic. Like I have a poem about vampires, and you can actually look for places that look for like horror poetry or goth poetry or whatever. There's even a couple of magazines that only publish poetry about food. Which would be cool for you. So you can get really lost in there, but it's kind of fun. They also have like lists. My favorite part of it is there's lists of the approachable markets. In other words, they publish almost everything everybody sends to them. So you want to feel good about yourself, send them something, you'll probably get on their page. Or the hardest ones to get into. And they also have like themed contest listings, so you can look through the upcoming contests and see if something you wrote fits something like that. So, and they also have a submissions tracker so that you can keep track of where you've sent it, which originally started using it for. So yeah, so definitely check
well, that gets me started, definitely, but I appreciate that because I'm kind of got my head back in the game now, and I feel like I should pick up where I kind of just left off. So good.
Well, yeah, it's it also helps with that whole like getting used to being rejected and not being a big deal.
I've had a lot of that. I still have, Kris, I still have another full memoir written. It's been edited by 2 different editors, including the former garden editor of the Minneapolis Star Tribune, who was my next door neighbor, and they both said, yeah, you should publish this. But I mean, I've sent it off probably a half a dozen times and either gotten nothing or, a rejection. And I should, but I know now that I know what I know, I actually wrote it before I started at Normandale. I need to sit down and spend, a month, and I need to redo it. But that has merit. It's sitting there, it's fat and kind of half ready to go. So yeah, another thing I can work on. Pardon?
Fat and half ready to go. That's what
fat and half ready to go. And there's no F words in it, so it'll probably never get published, but
no, it will. Yeah.
It's sitting there.
F words don't make great manuscripts, They can.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. Good.
Cool.
Exciting stuff.
All right. So I know the holidays are coming up, but I was thinking like around December 15th, I could hold another workshop. You guys could bring what you've got so far, like find a grant that you want to apply for, read the guidelines, get together what you think you need for the proposal, and then we'll check it over, like make sure that you've got everything you need. And then I can give you some pointers on what to do next. Does that sound good?
Okay. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, it's nice to see all your bright, shiny faces.
Thank you, Kris. Thanks for everything.
All right. We'll see you in about a month.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.